Welcome to Machine Minds, where technology and humanity meet. I'm your host, Greg Terrusian, founder of Samson Rose, a recruiting and search business focused on the robotics and AI industries. The Machine Minds show is where we dive deep into the intricate world of robotics and artificial intelligence. As a staffing industry leader with a passion for the frontiers of technology, I'm pleased to be bringing you intimate conversations with the founders, investors, and trailblazers who are at the heart of the AI and robotics revolution. In each episode, we dig into their journeys, the applications of the products they're working on, and the breakthroughs that are shaping our future. Join us as we explore how these machine minds are transforming the way we live, work, and understand our world. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a tech enthusiast, or just curious about this amazing field, you'll learn something new with each episode. Let's delve into the extraordinary. Let's delve into Machine Minds. Hello and welcome to the Machine Minds show, where technology and humanity meet. I'm your host, Greg Terrusian, founder of Samson Rose, a talent search firm focused on robotics and AI. And on today's episode, we are joined by Mika Saryan, VP of Engineering at Formic. Welcome to the show and thanks for being here, Mika.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Greg, for having me. Very excited to be on the show and talk a little bit about robotics, industrial automation, all the cool stuff.
So am I. So let's jump into it. I'd love to start really with your journey, your inspirations, early inspirations, your career path. So can you walk us through your professional journey up to this point and leading to your current role at Formic?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was growing up, I always knew I wanted to be an engineer. I loved playing with the toys, especially construction toys, building things, assembling stuff. And as I grew up a little bit more, I got introduced to software development and computers. And what I loved is finding this intersection between software and hardware. I love the flexibility of the software, of changing things, seeing how it works very quickly. But there is something magical about the hardware and how you can make software interact with it, and you can touch things, and it moves and it affects people, and it's very physical and tangible. That's what I like about IoT and robotics world in general.
Love that.
Yeah. And so my career took me through different paths. I went through automotive, entertainment, consumer devices, and eventually I ended up in robotics. So a lot of IoT things that I worked on, and some of the things that really made a big impact on me is, in general, safety of these devices, right? When you work with software products, if you have a bug, it's not that such a big deal, right? You change it, you fix it, maybe it's a nuisance for somebody. But one thing that in robotics and IoT stands out is that it really can impact somebody's safety and how people can have really life-threatening situations because of what you did incorrectly. And currently we're working with industrial automation. And again, safety is very important in those kind of conditions.
For sure. I think it's something that people don't think about or take for granted as well. Or, I've also been in the situation where you speak to some companies or work with companies that the founders or early engineers have pivoted from software into hardware and haven't always taken safety and security so seriously. And if you don't, someone who led security previously had told me, if you don't build this with security in mind from the start, it's very difficult to go back and fix everything, when you're trying to get a product ready for commercialization. And then how dangerous it is, what you touched on, right? When you've got these hardware elements, if it's autonomously moving or if people are working next to it, could be very dangerous, very dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the moments in my career was when I was working at Happiest Baby and we were working on the smart bassinet. So it's a smart bassinet, and one of the first tests that we were doing is with real babies. So it had very profound impact on me, where they brought a newborn and they put it in our product, and you have this feeling that, wow, this is nerve-wracking. I am going to interact with this newborn baby, and the software that I wrote may impact what happens to this baby. So
It's
from
a
that
lot of
moment on,
responsibility.
exactly, it's a
Yeah.
lot of responsibility. And luckily, the product was amazing. It was a big success. We shipped it to hundreds of thousands of people and helped hundreds of thousands of babies and families. But yeah, it's always on the back of my mind that, hey, we need to think about actual people that these products will interact with.
Yeah, definitely. I can vouch for that. We were a user of the product as well, and it helped a lot. Our youngest loved it. And I've heard loads of great things from people since. My cousin's actually just got one as well for her son.
Great, great. Very glad that it helps you.
Yeah. So let's go into some of the challenges that you might have faced throughout your career, because you've obviously worked in several different types of industries. It hasn't always been on the industrial side of things, right? Happiest Baby was consumer. And you've built your career up to now where you're a VP and obviously leading organizations, product direction, things like that. So any challenges along the way that you've faced, and then or if you haven't, which would be great for you, any milestones or achievements that you want to share?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the challenges, especially in IoT and robotics, it always has been hiring the talent. And I'm sure you know firsthand as you're working on recruitment that it's not very easy to find people who know robotics, who know IoT, and kind of understand this intersection of software and hardware. And it also makes it more difficult to do remote work as well, right? Since after COVID, a lot of people want to work remotely. So how do we work with hardware remotely? Uh, we were able to come up with some solutions. There's always like remote tools that we built, but it still remain the challenges for IoT and robotics world for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough one. A lot of people are still trying to navigate. Uh, I haven't seen it done. I'd be actually curious to find out from you how you guys set that up successfully and how you do that successfully. And I think for a lot of the listeners, they'd love to hear that, because whenever you're interacting with hardware, unless you've got a mirror of the person on site to do the work, like the implementation and testing, or even just their pair to do it, the hands-on portion, that can sometimes be a challenge.
Yes, absolutely. And it's what we try to do is build the infrastructure first. So we always focus on, do we have cameras? Do we have remote access to everything? And that's part of what Formic does. And we can talk a little bit later about our technologies as well. How do we maintain and monitor the systems remotely, and what tools we put in place to make this possible?
Nice. Well, that's a great introduction to your technology. Let's go into that. And if you could give us like an overview of Formic, and give us like an overview so we understand your mission in the industry and the technology that you guys create, and how you structure everything.
Absolutely. So what we do at Formic, we want to simplify the adoption of industrial automation in robotics for factories. And we primarily focus on small and mid-sized manufacturers, because a lot of the big factories like automotive or Amazon, they have armies of robotics engineers just running around the manufacturing plants, fixing everything, bringing up new systems. But all the mid-size and small-size manufacturers, they're essentially left out. It's too expensive for them to maintain the team of roboticists and engineers, and the upfront investment of the robotics is too high. So we are trying to solve all these problems for them. So one part of it is we provide robotics as a service, so they don't have to purchase the entire equipment upfront. Essentially, they pay us hourly for the work that we perform. So that reduces their capex, and they can start running the automation from day one. But we also teach and train them, and we provide the solutions that they don't need to fully understand what does it mean to bring robotics, right? We provide them the service. So let's say if they need some kind of palletizing or other application, we will say, we will do palletizing for you. Again, they don't need to become experts in automation. And that's what most of the small manufacturers, they're afraid of, right? They don't want to become experts in these new technologies they have never used.
Right,
and we
right.
provide full maintenance for the systems. If something breaks, it's our responsibility. So again, becomes very easy for them to use the systems.
Yeah, that's normally the risk for someone putting that in, like a new system or new product in that they've never used before, right? They don't want to hire all the people to maintain it, look after it, and then also if it breaks, who's at fault and how are they going to
Exactly.
pay for those repairs? So that's a great way, and probably reduces that barrier to entry for a bunch of customers as well, I can imagine.
Exactly. Yes. And
Okay.
we have customers throughout the US. Again, a lot of hardworking Americans, and we're trying to help to bring manufacturing back to US. There's a lot of now movement how to bring the manufacturing back to the United States.
Yeah, there's a lot of incentives, and I think there's a lot of companies working on that and focusing on that, rightly so, because yeah, there's a lot of reliance
Right.
on international manufacturing, which isn't going to be sustainable. I think COVID kind of
Exactly.
really showed us that, right? The dependency that we have on different countries and the supply chain issues that affected so much. So bringing that home to the US for the companies that need it is going to be crucial in the future. Okay, perfect. And what makes your technology or your offering unique?
So a lot of the approaches right now that some of the businesses take is to work with system integrators. So
Hmm.
system integrators, what they do, they will purchase a robot from an OEM, let's say Kuka, Fanuc, or others, and they will build everything around it. So they'll build the conveyor belts, they'll build the safety systems around it. Unfortunately, the problem with that approach is that they focus on delivering the system essentially once. They are not
Right.
focusing on the cost of operating that equipment. Is it going to break later on? It's not what they're interested in, right?
Mm,
And the other challenge that they have, they build everything custom for that one specific application.
got it.
So there are a lot of, and they're trained mechanical and electrical engineers. So what they do, they build a system, primarily hardware focused, and they will install it. And then if there are any software issues later on or control issues later on, you need to bring them back, hire them again, pay expensive costs. And it's not their incentive to lower those costs.
Right.
So the approach that we take is a little bit different, right? Because first of all, we focus a lot on the software, so which allows us to change and reconfigure the systems, right? And we can also provide the benefits of managing it at scale, because if we are buying a lot of the systems, so if we can purchase 20 or 30 of them, and we can deploy the same code on all of them, we can save a lot of money. So, which is again, system integrators will not be able to do, right? Because they are coding for one specific
Right. It's custom.
system at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because they are, their background is primarily electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, they're not necessarily following the best practices of software practices that the industry have adopted. If you think about, let's say, AWS, how it evolved, initially people were just buying servers and configuring one server at a time. But what AWS did, they started creating this infrastructure as a code approach, and they maintain a lot of servers at the same time, which drastically reduces the cost of maintenance of each one. So we are trying to bring that kind of practices of unit tests and other software best practices to industrial automation and apply it at scale.
It's really exciting, actually. When you think about it and when you break it down like that, that is really exciting. Question that I did have for you on the business model side, when you said, obviously it's a RAS model, but they just pay for the work that you do instead of for the equipment. So is it like if our robot is working X amount of hours a day, or, moving X amount of packages, for example, I don't know all the different applications, but that you would only charge for that as opposed to having
Exactly.
it. Oh, okay.
Exactly.
Oh, cool.
So that's why we have the monitoring. We know exactly how many hours the robot worked, and you will be charged specifically for that amount of hours. There are certain minimum hours within the contract, but what we do, we provide flexibility, because you essentially think of your cell phone plan in old times, where let's say you had certain number of minutes, and then if you haven't used those minutes, they will roll over into the next month.
Right.
So we provide the same kind of solution. So if you haven't used your hours in 1 month, because a lot of the manufacturers, they have seasonality, depending on the season, they use a lot more hours or less hours. It will just roll over, and over time, you're going to use all those hours.
That's really smart, actually. Yeah, I hadn't heard of that before. A lot of the RAS models that I was familiar with is basically like leasing or renting, you
Right.
know, and you pay a set amount a month. But a lot of those business models or pricing models, even in things like insurance, right? You see it in car insurance. If you just pay per mile, like if you don't drive a lot, you're going to pay less
Exactly.
car insurance. But if you drive more, you know, it goes up to a certain amount and gets capped, and that's beneficial for a lot of people.
Exactly, because
As I
it
can
helps
imagine
with
this would be.
it helps with the cash flow as well, right? Let's say if your business is going well, you have a lot of things to do. That means you're getting a lot of revenue, so you can cover those costs, right? And when there's less business, you pay less to us as well.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. That's really cool. Well, I wanted to talk about the industries that you are really having an impact in, but obviously it's a lot in the industrial and manufacturing primarily. Is there anything anywhere else that your products or service can be applied?
It's primarily manufacturing, but within
Yeah.
manufacturing, we work with different verticals. A lot of the times we do palletizing. We probably deployed most of the systems on palletizing, where we'll pick up the boxes and place them on the pallets. But then we do machine tending, we do welding, case packing. So there are a lot of different verticals within the manufacturing industries where our systems could be applied.
So a customer could technically come to you guys and have multiple robots from you doing different things within their facility.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
we do have customers that buy both, let's say, case packing and palletizing. And in some cases, they're attached to each other. In some cases, they're not.
Yeah.
So you could have the entire system where it will pick up the part, put it in the boxes, and then put boxes on the pallets, and then do the wrapping around the back boxes. So that the entire manufacturing flow.
It's cool. It's good to know. Even for me, you know, when recommending people. Let's move the conversation slightly more into just the current state of the robotics industry in general. Like, are there any trends that you're observing right now within your sector of robotics and AI that you're aware of?
Within industrial automation in general, there are various trends, right? So one trend is there are new startups that are trying to break into the industrial automation, right? So there are these companies, for example, Intrinsic, which is a Google company, and they're trying to go into manufacturing with different approach, right? And also like Boston Dynamics, right? Those are really cool robotics companies, and they're trying to provide their products. There is a lot of resistance in the traditional robotics, industrial automation robotics world to adopt those things, right? And part of it is essentially what I mentioned earlier, right? Software. How do you rely primarily on software? How do you apply updates? And a lot of them, they rely on PLCs, which is programmable logic controllers, which are very rigid and a lot of expensive automation and manufacturing equipment. So there is this shift to try to bring software approaches into the industrial automation world. Some of the challenges that exist there is that a lot of these new companies, they don't have automation background. So they're not familiar with the problems that exist within the industrial automation world. So for a lot of the times, the real world scenarios start breaking the software that they bring, right? Because every box is different. The sizes of the boxes is different. So their approach just doesn't work within industrial automation. So we need to merge these two worlds into one reality, right? And first, there has to be more adoption from industrial automation native people to adopt the software practices. And on the other side, the software companies, they need to understand the realities of the industrial automation manufacturing world.
Yeah, that makes sense. That definitely makes sense. You'd think that they have a specialist from the industry on staff to try and help navigate all of this, or at least like a test bed client that they can utilize all of this instead of trying to create it all from scratch, especially if you're trying to impact the whole industry or get the whole industry to adopt it instead of, making a new company.
And
Yeah.
some of them do, and some of them don't. So obviously, yeah. And we are, what is unique about Formic as well. So we have both those people, right? So we have people from traditional industrial automation world, and they bring decades of experience of what can go right, what can go
Yeah.
wrong, what are the issues. And then we have more generation of startup, change the software, adopt quickly type of mentality, and we're merging the two.
Yeah. That's great. They're the most successful companies you tend to find, like with the industry expertise as well as the robotics and software expertise on staff, so you can really address the problem in a real way, a real world
Right.
way. Yeah. And do you guys use a lot of AI in what you do?
Not a lot of AI, so we are looking at some of the things that AI can bring.
Hmm.
But if you look at it, we're trying to catch up and bring the industry at least to the level of, hey, let's use standard software. Let's
Yeah.
use software as a main platform for all of these things. But I definitely see how AI can change things as it progresses. So it's definitely not out of the world to provide the training for the robots using Gen AI, right? So
Hmm.
obviously Gen AI is a big
It's the
keyword
buzz right now.
nowadays, right? Exactly. But it's definitely feasible, right? Like, why do you need to program every single step that robot can do? It sounds very feasible where you can approach the machine and say, take these 5 boxes and put them on the pallet and do this 100 times. So there are definitely people who are experimenting with that. I predict it'll be at least 2 years before it actually becomes feasible within the manufacturing world, but it's coming.
Yeah, I bet. It's also, I think, one of the industries that has probably been a little bit more spooked about AI and then even robotics in general, right? Like taking over jobs, displacing people, things like that. And then to your point earlier about hiring a team or specialists to who know that technology. Now we have to think about additional headcount to come in and manage and maintain all of this, which is a bit daunting. You don't want to be using those dollars on another person if you don't need to.
Exactly. And that's another point about Formic. What we're trying to do, we're trying to make it very easy to operate these machines. Because how we envision it, we don't want to displace the existing workforce. We want to train people. So let's say I am picking boxes entire day, right? Day in and day out, I'm taking
Hmm.
boxes and putting them on the pallet. So we want to train these people to become operators of these machines, not necessarily displace them, because you
Nice.
still need some kind of operators. You need people who will run the machines. And that's part of our goal to make the user interface and interaction with these automations very simple. So because if you think about it, the industrial automation shouldn't be more difficult than our consumer products that you see every day, right? There shouldn't
Mm.
be like, hey, I need a degree in robotics to operate a palletizer. So we are moving in the direction, let's train people, let's teach them, let's show them really nice interface that will allow them intuitively to understand what buttons to push. And we we want people not to be afraid of the technology, because very often what we see is we'll install the machine and we tell them, hey, turn it on, or jog the robot, what we say, which essentially move the robot to a specific point. They don't want to do that. So we want to overcome that barrier. We want to make it very simple for them.
It makes sense. Makes sense. That's really good, actually, to know that you're just retraining the people who've been doing the job to now be the operator of the robot. Some people listening to this, maybe listening to this or outside the industry would think, well, why would you hire or have someone full time operating when they could be doing the job? But then you also have to think about, well, a robot isn't going to take a sick day or stop because his back hurts or take a lunch break, or, the consistency and throughput is always going to be there. So you're going to end up with much greater throughput at the end of the day. And the one person could probably monitor and control multiple, they don't just
Exactly.
have to be, it's not one for one.
Exactly. And there is a huge labor shortage within manufacturing industry.
Yeah.
So it's very hard for them to find people, and it's understandable, right? Who wants to pick up boxes whole day
Yeah.
and move them around, right? So they definitely need additional help from this robotics and automation to fill those positions.
That's great. Yeah. It's also very promising for the people in those roles. As you get older, your body's not going to be like it used to. You're not going to be able to move as many boxes. Now your back's going to be giving out and all of that stuff. But then the fear of being out of work is going to go, and you're going to learn a new skill, and then you're going to be able to be even more productive and have a longer, healthier life. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about, before we wrap things up, the future of robotics and AI. You obviously touched on Gen AI there a little bit. We've been talking about your products and how it can impact the industries that you serve. What innovations do you anticipate happening in the near future? Is there anything that you've been reading about or that you're particularly interested in that could be coming?
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel that there are already a lot of companies that are doing the automation and robotics, and they solved a lot of the problems in their labs, right? So essentially, and you can read about all kind of companies. Anything you can think of, somebody is trying to automate or apply robotics to it, right? The challenge over the next few years will be how do you apply it to the real world? So again, they will bring it to the real world. They hit the real world problems and they don't know how to solve them. So I do envision there will be a lot of tools and infrastructure around how do we simulate these real world scenarios in the lab so we can mature the technology more. And you'll see a lot of it within the automotive industry. There are a number of companies such as Applied Intuition or Foxglove. And what they do, they create this simulation environments where you can change the environment, where you can roll back, where you can record all the sensors and do everything within the automotive world. Unfortunately, none of that exists in other industry. So there's nothing in agriculture, there's nothing in food production, there's nothing in industrial manufacturing as well. So I do envision there will be more software technologies and infrastructure that help simulate this environment and bridge that gap between being in the lab versus being in the real world.
So much greater simulations. Yeah, it makes sense. And there's so much interesting technology that's happening in the labs and people writing papers about and things like that. But like to your point, when it comes to the real world, a lot of that breaks or it just doesn't anticipate a lot for specific industries or use cases that can just set it back.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, very cool. And how do you think that type of thing, the greater simulations, obviously it will help bring products to market, I assume, quicker and more safely, but is there any other way that you can think about it impacting society or the industries that you mentioned?
Primarily, it will just accelerate the adoption of robots, right? So there will be more and more of them in different industries because people will be able, the engineers will be able to simulate these environments, and eventually they will be able to be in restaurants and other places. And
so I'm sure that will help a lot with like regulation as well and like certification for certain industries or use cases and things like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that will be another industry that will probably emerge from this, right? How do you certify this product? What is safe? What is not safe, right? Especially, and again, in industry when automation is not very common, like restaurants, right? Like, how do you create certifications for all of this? It will definitely be in that new industry.
Yeah, it's true because they obviously have their own standard for food, the food authorities and stuff like that. Of safety and cleanliness
Right.
and everything. So how is your robot going to fit in with that?
Right. Exactly. Is it controlled by FDA or it's another
Yeah,
agency? Who
yeah.
controls this type of things?
It's a good point. Yeah. You know, the strictest ones are obviously the surgical and medical robots out there that have to go through so much right now, but are having such a huge impact on success rates and diagnosis rates and things like that. So it's only natural that every other industry would get to a point where you can have it everywhere you go.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, look, thank you so much for your time. Are there any final thoughts, anything that you want to share, messages with the audience, especially like aspiring engineers that might be on a similar path to you or entrepreneurs in this field?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we touched on it throughout the whole conversation, but I would say, especially the new startups, go into the real world. If you're building something in the lab, it's not enough. If you're building something for industrial manufacturing, go to the factory and see what the real world is, see how loud it is, see how unpredictable it is, because a lot of things are very different than what you thought. And it
Right.
might spark new ideas about your product, or it may prove that, hey, you need to do something different. So it's very, very important to get input from real world.
Don't build in a vacuum.
Exactly.
Don't take stealth mode literally.
Yes,
Don't
absolutely.
not tell anyone about what you're doing. Yeah, no, that's great advice. That's great advice. Well, where can people find you and find out more about Formic?
The best place is formic.co,
Mm-hmm.
formic.co. On our website, a lot is described on what we do. And yeah, if you're looking for industrial automation, robotics as a service, we're definitely happy to talk to you.
Amazing. Well, thank you. And thank you for sharing all this great insight, your journey, your guys' very unique RAS model, and all the other gems that you shared. I really appreciate it. And hopefully, we'll have you on the show again in the years to come.
Sounds good. Thank you, Greg. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Mika.